Hey folks, I'm Matt and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Welcome to Season 2. We have Vinnie Adams from Disclosure Team joining us to talk UAPs and some breaking news we just dropped hours ago. But first, do us a solid, smash that thumbs up and subscribe button and leave a comment. We always want to know what you think about this show. If you're a podcast fan, we are on all podcasting platforms. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. Finally, your financial support enables us to bring you this show with exceptional guests. Please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Go to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show and choose the right plan for you. For those of you that are watching us live on YouTube, Super Chats, of course, are open and are a great way to show your financial support. We very much appreciate it. Okay, so on with the show. Our next guest is a UAP researcher, writer, and YouTube host. Vinnie will also be the host of the ECHO Conference on UAPs this November in Paris, France. Please welcome Vinnie Adams. Vinnie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Matt. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here, and it's really good to see you, my friend.
Excellent. I just realized one of our video players unplugged. That's why our thing didn't play there. But anyway, tell us a bit about what you've been up to.
Oh, same old, really. I've been plugging away at the YouTube show. We just finished the Season 2 of Phenomenology has just aired as well. I am, doing a bit of the conference circuit at the moment. I was out in Roswell, New Mexico a couple of months ago. Last weekend, I was in Manchester, England at a conference, just doing a bit of networking and meeting up with some good friends. And same old, busy as always.
Nice. Yeah, that's same here. So as we were talking a little bit earlier off air, I had to take kind of a 2-month hiatus. I was off to Bangkok for a bit, doing some things, and then off to Vegas for a few weeks for another show, and doing the stuff that keeps the mortgage paid sometimes interferes with the whole UAP issue. So, or doing content on it anyway. But what I wanted to mention too, which I thought was really cool, and I just happened to notice this yesterday, was our 1-year anniversary of our very first show. And you were our very first guest. So literally a year and 1 day, you're back to help us celebrate Season 2. So we're really glad to have you join us. So it was you and Dan. But yeah, man, thank you. Thanks for coming back.
My pleasure, man. That's amazing. It's amazing it's been that amount of time. Somewhat scary at the same time as well, because time's flying by at the moment.
Ah, man. Tell me about it. It truly, truly is. So, so like I said, we were on a hiatus for 2 months, and of course missed a bunch of really cool stuff on the UAP front. And one of the things we missed was the House Oversight Committee hearing, where you had 3 witnesses. You had Ryan Graves, you had David Fravor, and of course the big witness was the whistleblower David Grush. Let's watch this highlight from that.
The UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know that you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the inspector.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Wow, I mean that was pretty crazy news there. So crash retrievals and biologics. So how did the mainstream news media, especially in your neck of the woods in the United Kingdom, how did they react to all of this, and what kind of coverage did they how much did they cover it?
Very little, to be honest. There were some mainstream publications outside of the usual tabloids that kind of run with the kind of little green men kind of stories. It was touched upon in a small, serious manner, but, you know, one day it's there, the next day it's gone. It was very unfortunate. We were lucky enough to have one occasion where one BBC radio station did actually interview David Grush, but it wasn't kind of going into the kind of depth and detail that we may have liked to have heard, the kind of the questions that were asked. It almost felt as if the questions were asked after the interview and they had slotted them in. It was very unprofessionally done, and it really didn't give us much to go on.
What is your opinion as far as why? For me, I really thought that this testimony would be the thing that would really finally make mainstream media begin to pay attention and not be playing X-Files music, although they do seem a little bit better about that. What is your theory, or at least what you can speak about in your experience in the UK, as to why, after all of this insane testimony that we heard from one of the most highly decorated intelligence officials, why do you think their head is still in the sand? It boggles my mind.
I see it from that point of view, but I can also understand why people would say, well, David Grush has claimed to have spoken to 40 people and interviewed them, and I think they might be just sitting back and waiting. Let's hear from these first-hand direct witnesses who were involved with the program, who did have hands on these objects, these materials, these biologics, let's say. You know, David Grush has laid out the groundwork, the initial groundwork, and I feel like mainstream media, like the big names, are probably just waiting for that next step, because maybe they're just scared of looking stupid if it all turns out to be what we don't want it to be.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Was there anything in the hearing that you heard that surprised you? Of course, we've heard about all these rumors for years and years of crash retrieval programs and alien bodies and all of that. Was there anything that really stuck out that surprised you?
There wasn't anything that really surprised me. I think it was very interesting to see the three witnesses, who they were. You know, for anyone in the UFO community, we're very familiar with Ryan Graves' testimony. We're very familiar with Commander Fravor's testimony. And it was great that they were there to kind of give their story to a broader audience. You know, the general public that were tuning in were possibly hearing some of this for the first time. So I felt that was a positive in itself. But, you know, I'm not going to kid anyone. We were all there to really see what David Grush was going to say. And I think it became quite evident quite quickly that he wasn't willing to go any further, really, than what was already laid out in, you know, the big bombshell story from June 5th that was published in the debrief by Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal. It seemed that David Grush was really treading on, you know, like a glass surface, let's say, with what he was able to say. And we clearly saw that he would refer back to, I'm not able to say this in this setting, and was almost pointing to the fact that he wanted to say a lot more, but he would need to be in a skiff with people with clearances to be able to kind of spill the beans.
One of the things that I heard, and I wasn't really able to kind of follow up on, was Tim Burchett was saying that they wanted to put him in a skiff and have people in Congress that were authorized or cleared to listen to some of this stuff, to hear that classified section. But but he was refused. What did you hear about that, or do I have that story straight?
Yeah, it sounds about right. I mean, I think Tim Burchett's come up against a few kind of issues, let's say. You know, we have people within his own committee kind of going back on his proposed legislation as well. So I think he's getting some pushback, that's for sure. It doesn't seem like it's holding him back as far as his persistence, let's say. I think between when the Senate and the House return in September, that's when the important work's going to be done. I know the Senate returns on September 5th. The House returns on September 12th. I think it's then between, you know, some of the committees, specifically the Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committees of both houses, are really going to start pushing to get a finalized version of the NDAA now to sort of get it to the president by the end of the year for signing. You know, that's kind of how I see it. You know, I will caveat that I'm not an expert on the ins and outs of the workings of the NDAA and the US government, but it just seems that it's now when they return from their summer break that I think we're going to start getting the ins and outs of what we might expect by the end of the year.
I certainly hope so. One of the things that we've messaged on and what we have been hearing, and I'm curious if you have anything to add to it, is Representative Mike Turner, who is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. He came out, I think it was like in July or maybe it was August, really kind of playing down David Grush and seemed to be blowing it off. And you know, he is in the district of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So a lot of people, including us, have sort of wondered if any sort of financial interests are encouraging him to try and derail the UAP topic. Have you heard anything of the same sort, or am I the only one?
No, I've certainly heard all the conversations and rumors about all of that. I think it's too early to kind of get too conspiratorial on that. I think we're still in the middle of these conversations that are most happening behind closed doors. You know, I think it's very easy because we hear something that we don't want to hear to say, well, he's getting paid by these people or he's against disclosure. It's very easy to jump to that initial conclusion and that. But I think we're still in the middle of these behind closed doors conversations. So I'm willing to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt to people like that, because, you know, I'm aware that these things take time. We know that from past years, and the way that the movement happens when it comes to the government officials, whether it be on either side of the you know, the House or the Senate, or Republicans and Democrats, it's too easy to kind of jump to these far out conclusions. So I'm just going to see how it plays out, and we can make our decisions further down the line.
I wonder if we will see any sort of major announcement on the Senate side. From my perspective, it seems like on the House side, they've been very vocal. You have Tim Burchett, who has just been a total firebrand when it comes to this whole thing. But of course, you have Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's been on our show, who her and Marco Rubio and others really have championed a lot of this legislation that has gone through. What's your guess? Do you think we'll see any sort of Senate hearing? It seems to be, I don't know, kind of crickets up until now.
It does, unfortunately, especially in the public eye. I mean, it was great seeing the House, or the subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee doing the hearing. We had a very bipartisan attendance. I think that was very positive. I think we need to have people from the Gang of Eight in front of people like David Grush, the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and all these kind of people. Put David Grush in front of people from the Gang of Eight. Let the staffers from Senator Gillibrand and Rubio really get down and do the work behind the scenes that the people did for the House Oversight Committee hearing. And then we might start seeing some slightly bigger and better conversations. I'm confident that work will be done. What we need now is to have it happen as soon as possible. There obviously have been murmurings and conversations happening within the community behind the scenes, let's say, from sources. I know myself, I've heard it. I know friends of mine have heard it from their sources that there is potential for Senate hearings to be kind of next on the agenda. Do we know they're going to happen? No, of course not. Not until they're announced officially. But I'd like to see that happen next, just to keep the momentum and just to keep that ball rolling down the field, so that we, the people in the UFO community, can just, you know, keep moving forward.
I also think too, if the Senate holds a serious hearing, not not the one, not one in like a small sort of meeting room, but something that really has the grandeur of it, for lack of a better term. I feel like if that happens, that will really sort of lend a great deal, an even greater deal of credibility to this, and provide sort of top cover that hopefully then on the House side there will be more hearings. So that's sort of my theory. I don't know if it's true, but I certainly hope so. But I think the one thing that was really true and very, very apparent that you touched on was there was clear bipartisan interest in this. And you sent me a graphic earlier. I didn't have a chance to put it up, but it was pretty much almost split down the middle, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we you look at the people up front sitting, raised up from the audience, and you've got people on both sides. You've got a decent number of them as well, and some of them were there for longer than they needed to be. We know that these senators and Congress people are very busy people. They have meeting after meeting to go to every day, all day, and it's been said that a lot of them were there way past their time for the subcommittee hearing. I think that really says a lot. There were people that weren't even part of the committee that were invited and allowed to be there as well. And it shows interest in the subject. It shows that it's being taken seriously. And then you look at the questioning that was done as well by these people. They obviously have staffers that have been doing a lot of work for them behind the scenes and really sort of cluing them in onto what's happening to the point where it was taken deadly serious. And I think it all showed within that hearing.
Yeah, I know that at one point there was, I don't know if it was Mick West, it was one of the professional debunkers stating that all of this was strictly due to staffers believing in this UFO fantasy and convincing their bosses that it's real. I mean, what a load of crap.
Yeah,
but
I think it's important just to say there that a lot of the staffers do have really high clearances as well. They are read into some of the information that they're allowed to be read into, but this is how they can formulate some of the questions that they may then pass on to the people they work for to ask these questions. So they're very informed. It doesn't come down to them believing in aliens because they're just young and stupid or whatever, as some of these debunkers might think. They're doing a very good job on this subject, and it was very good to see it in a public setting.
For sure, and and as you mentioned, these staffers. They cannot advise, which is their job. They cannot advise their bosses on national security matters if they're not able to be read into these things. So
exactly.
These aren't people just fresh out of college that I think Mick West would like you to believe. But one of the things that I think is really important here, especially to people new to the subject, a lot of our viewers are not UFO folks, they're just very curious about it, is that there has really been quite a journey in terms of what Congress has done on the UAP topic and the legislation that's happened and the mandating of a Pentagon office to investigate it. And I thought we would sort of dig into that a little bit. And what brought this to mind was this really excellent article by Chris Sharp, Liberation Times. Chris Sharp, who's one of your fellow countrymen there, is doing just some absolutely fantastic journalistic work. I've always said kind of the same rigor of the Washington Post journalists that investigated Watergate. So while the New York Times, Julian Barnes, and all these other folks are asleep at the wheel or on the dole from the Pentagon, this guy's actually doing really, really great work. And I don't have it in the YouTube description, but I'll make sure to put a link to this article. It is extensive and it is long, but it really is, I think, one of the best articles I've seen in quite some time, laying out how really kind of how all of this began in terms of the Pentagon office leading up to where we are today. And it all began with the UAP task force. So if you'd like, maybe kind of give us a little bit of a briefing on how the UAP task force came about and its importance, and the fact that David Grush was on it, right?
Well, this is the thing, and I think this is really important that we've come to realize because of the breaking news of David Grush being a part of the UAP task force. It's become a little bit clearer now that they were actually gaining some momentum with the work that they were doing under Jay Stratton. And now it was very unfortunate that Jay Stratton got moved on to other activities, because under Jay Stratton, David Grush was clearly doing some very good work. We had Brennan McKinnon, I think, come in and take over from Jay Stratton, and we didn't hear that much about it. And, so it was a little bit disheartening in the public eye that we just didn't know what was happening with the UAP task force. Like I said, it's clearly they were getting somewhere with it because of David Grush's work. Then we really get into the weeds of it, where there was a lot of conflict because throughout that year, throughout 2021, leading up to the legislation that was being put forward for the fiscal year 2022 through the National Defense Authorization Act, we had a lot of different legislation coming in. We then had Congress trying to instate the AARO office, which was promising a lot of positives, which all sounded really good. And then out of nowhere, we have AIMSOG coming in, which, again, it's situated within OUSDI, which we didn't really want. We've heard about pushback from people within OUSDI. And then you just look at AIMSOG, they had no reference to UAP being transmedium. So the group would literally be concentrating on airborne phenomena, ignoring ocean and space. No requirement for development and implementation of any plans for collection and analysis. It was a bare bones kind of group, no incidents would be reported outside of special use airspace or anything like that. No study into the physiological of UAP on military personnel. No provision for the recruitment of contractors or civilians, anybody outside of a small, tight-knit group within the government. No consultation with foreign countries, so there'd be no Five Eyes kind of involvement or anything like that. These are all things that's what we've been crying out for them, that we expect from the government, no accountability or anything. It always just seemed they came in and sideswiped anything that the Congress was trying to do. This internal battle that I heard about a lot between the Pentagon and Congress, and it just came in out of nowhere, and we were just like, oh, it was just a disaster.
It's a load of crap, as I like to say. Referring to Chris Sharp's article here, you were talking about Director Jay Stratton. So he says in this article, faced with a colossal endeavor and limited resources at its disposal, the task force encountered a further setback when its director, Jay Stratton, was reassigned to different responsibilities, a move that could be interpreted as a potential act of deliberate hindrance. Now, at this point, was it under OUSDI-NS, or did that come later?
I'm not. That's a very good question. I don't have that information in front of me right now. It wouldn't surprise me if it was. I know that I think AIMSOG was a continuation of the UAP task force. Right. So it would have been under OUSDI-NS. I would have thought so, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And when this was put under OUSDI-NS, Lou Elizondo, who hopefully we'll have on our show at some point, had this quote, which I thought was really, really pretty prescient. He said, please contact your representatives and let them know this is unacceptable and not in the best interest of the American people. The OUSDI-NS is the one single office that has continually lied about this topic and persecuted whistleblowers. I mean, that's pretty damn direct there. It's I've yet to hear anything good about OUSDI-NS.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where we get into the realms of people like Gary Reed being involved. And for anyone familiar with that story, there was a whole debacle about stonewalling and just doing the minimum to kind of move this subject forward and to get any kind of information, not only to the general public, but information to Congress as well. There was just a real lack of momentum and lack of interest, and it just was a mess.
Yeah, I definitely would say so. And we're going to get to what has recently happened with OUSDI-NS here in a bit. So anyway, yeah. So we had AOI, MSG, and then God, these people love their acronyms. The Anomaly Surveillance AIMSOG. So Anomaly Surveillance Tracking and Resolution Office. I mean, that's a total mouthful there. And you have to wonder if especially, so they hear that Gillibrand is cooking up this program to finally take this thing seriously, and the Pentagon's like, oh no, we've got something even better. And of course, it's got a huge ass acronym that no one is going to remember. Sometimes I wonder if these acronyms are a way to sort of confuse people and get them to not pay attention. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that, but there's also, they just expect people to think that, oh, look, they're on it, we don't need to worry about it. But then, again, when you look into what it's all about, you know, we look at things like there was no mention of the threat posed to nuclear assets, whether it be historically or now. There was no requirement included to provide unclassified findings, not only to the public, but again, to Congress. It was just a bare bones, absolute waste of time. It was just to say, don't worry about it, we've got this covered. And it was you know, not what we wanted, especially at that time when Astro, through Senator Gillibrand, were promising these really good things that everyone was getting excited about. Yeah,
for sure. And I kind of wonder too, like if Ronald Moultrie and that whole group at OUSDINS thought that, you know what, we'll put something together, not give it any money, and in 6 months everyone will kind of forget about this whole topic. And that's what I wonder, if that's what occurred, that they just thought, oh, this is just going to go away on its own.
It wouldn't surprise me one bit at all. I mean, and then I'll just say now that even back then I was having a lot of conversations with people like Christopher Sharp, and we were saying, this needs to move out from OUSDINS. This just needs to be somewhere else, whether it be, I don't know, under Space Force or even under ODNI, under Avril Haines directly. You know, we were crying out for this a year ago because we knew, because of the conflict within the Pentagon and Congress, that this just wasn't going to make any movement or momentum. And here we are a year later, and maybe we might start seeing some movement. I'm still not convinced.
I'm not quite convinced either. You know, and one thing to note that I thought was interesting in Sharp's article was that all of this was created under Kathleen Hicks, Undersecretary of Defense, and Avril Haines, the Director of the Office of National Intelligence. This was all really their doing. They set this up this way, which begs to question, what success did they really want this thing to have? Now, so this thing transitions over in July of 2022. They hire Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and the thing is rebranded as AARO, the all domain, I think at the time, anomalous office or something. How did all that come about?
I mean, it was. I don't think AIMSOG had any longevity anyway. I think we were all quite aware that things after the NDAA passed and we went into that early months of that year, that it wasn't going to be a long-term office and that it would manifest into something new. Absolutely, that happened. AARO was announced. There were obviously talks about who would be taking over AARO. I got to give credit to D. Dean Johnson. He very early on surmised that it would be Dr. Kirkpatrick, and that was very interesting. You know, I have some very good friends who have worked very closely with Dr. Kirkpatrick and US Space Command, and who have said very positive things about him. And so I was somewhat excited. Maybe excited is not the word, but I was, you know, certainly not disheartened. I thought maybe we're going to get somewhere with this. And AARO, it was very clear within the first few months, from I think June or July of 2022. By the time we hit September, we'd heard kind of nothing. I was then aware that, you know, this is going to be a long and drawn out process. And it all came back for me to being under OUSDNI. I was like, there's no surprises here. And here we are this year. We've had Kirkpatrick sat in front of Gillibrand and that, saying some of these bold statements about no evidence of of extraterrestrial, you know, or non-human intelligence connections to any of the things that they've looked at. I still put it down a little bit to him not being under Title 50 authorities, having Title 10 authorities. There just seems to be, AARO aren't up and running still to this day. And it's just frustrating, isn't it? The fact that this office was mandated to be up and running and doing the work that they should be doing. And yet here we are now. It's gone under the purview of Hicks. and she's had to really kick some butt just to get a website up. I mean, it's frustrating.
It's crazy. I want to play a clip you just referenced to. This was Dr. Kirkpatrick Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick testifying in April at the Senate subcommittee hearing on emerging threats.
I should also state clearly for the record that in our research, AARO has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics.
Yeah, that one, I think that pissed off a lot of whistleblowers. And we're going to talk about some news that we just broke shortly before we came on. But that statement didn't go over so well, did it?
It didn't. I mean, if you look and you watch that whole hearing, Dr. Kirkpatrick was clearly showing that he was coming at this from this very scientific and analytical scope, let's say. I think that didn't wash with a lot of people especially within the UFO community. It kind of just seemed to knock us back a step or two. And by this time, we'd had months and months of waiting for things to happen. And it smeared the whole AARO office in a lot of people's eyes. I mean, I even still was like, well, maybe he's just not been, given the information. Maybe he's running off of minimal information, not having Title 50 authorities and just running under Title 10. But then, he's got people like Moultrie and Bray who do have access to this information, who are probably able to feed him the information that he's not going to get directly through Title 50. Slight speculation there. These are the kind of things that I was having conversations around, and this was April 19th, I think that happened. And following that, I was reaching out to people saying, could he be getting information through Moultrie and Bray that he might not get until he's got Title 50? And they were saying, yeah, it's a possibility. So it's very muddy for me around that time about what he was, privy to and what he wasn't. Was he towing a line for other people, or was he just being genuinely, look, I haven't seen enough to kind of go there yet? I don't know.
I got the impression, too, that he was also being very, very careful to not say anything that would piss off his bosses, namely Moultrie. I don't remember the exact quotes, but there were a couple of things that Senator Gillibrand asked him where he was very political in how he answered it, and I was left with the impression it was to make sure he didn't get called on the carpet by Ronald Moultrie. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting that Chris Sharp pointed out as well was this sort of funding deficit of AARO. So the original budget number given to AARO was classified, but apparently it was way under of what they were supposed to get. And Senator Gillibrand asked about that. And what Chris stated in the article was, and I think it was an additional $27 million in funding is what they requested. Excuse me, but apparently Moultrie never told anybody, the office that I oversee needs proper funding, which again makes me very suspect of his motives. Absolutely,
and we saw Senator Gillibrand having meetings regarding that. There were some clips, flying around YouTube and Twitter and everything about her really putting her foot down to say, this was mandated within the National Defense Authorization Act, and we need that funding. It was skipped 1 year. I think she said we just didn't get it, and she was really laying it down for the people that she was sat in front of. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Northcom and SOCOM and all those kind of people, and she was really saying, you guys need to pull this together and work together to really get this happening. So yeah, I mean, I hope she continues to do that. It does seem like she has kind of slipped a little bit on this subject matter. I'm not convinced 100%. I think we'll see in the next few months.
The proof will be in the pudding, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not the first person to level that complaint. I mean, we've always been big fans of hers, but what's the phrase? Money talks, bullshit walks, or something like that. So you gotta.
Well, this is it, and I'm not one to like I said earlier, I'm not one to kind of just completely flip on people and right. dismiss them because we hear one thing, or we might see something that comes across as slightly negative towards the drive that we've seen previously. But it makes you suddenly start to think, we really need to kind of see this continuous momentum that we had previously, and you know, it's always a little bit worrying when we see a little bit of slip or a little bit of something we don't like.
And for me, that has been kind of a concern of mine. Was there was all this build. So you had the David Grush thing that came out in the debrief. Then you had the testimony, the hearing in Congress, and there was all this buildup that was going on between the article coming out, and that was what, early June, I think, or something like that, all the way to the hearing. And then it was like, pew, just everything kind of fell off the cliff. And I'm like, where's the momentum? And you have Tim Burchett and others trying to keep it up. But I don't know. I think, to me, that's a bit of a concern.
It is a little bit. I mean, it's like I said earlier, I think whenever we get any kind of hearing or reports, it breaks and it drops and everyone's excited and we kind of analyze it and pull it apart for a week or two. And then inevitably we get that dip, because it's all been said and done. We've covered it, and everybody logs onto YouTube and sees all of the kind of podcasters covering it. Then we get the dip, and we got that recently after the hearings. You know, we saw Grush. We saw the Grush story break early June. We got the hearings. We then hit a dip, and that's understandable. And people are like, oh, that's it. Everyone's given up on it. But then we do hear murmurings of the potential of Senate hearings and stuff like that. And, you know, I'm in a lucky position where I think you are too, where we get to speak to people privately and maybe see a little bit more of what's actually happening and not feel so disheartened. But at the same time, we're just like anybody else in the public eye. It needs to be public. We need that transparency. And it's all good seeing Tim Burchett on every news station or whatever saying all these things, but we need more than that. We need the Gang of Eight. We need Gillibrand. We need Rubio to keep pushing this.
I totally agree. I need to work on my Tim Burchett impression. I've been trying to get him on the show, but I don't. I think because we're on the left side of his aisle, his staff isn't too hot on that idea. But as we always say, we treat the UAP topic in a completely bipartisan way. There are people on both sides of the aisle that are doing really great work about this, and we are always happy to promote them, whether they're agree with us politically or not, because at the end of the day, this whole thing transcends politics for sure. So some good, interesting bit of news. One of our big complaints was, where is the website? Where is the front-facing public interface where if you're a whistleblower or whatever, how do you get a hold of AARO? What's the number? What, all of that. It's like if I were hired to create the FBI tip line for people to call in anonymously with tips for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but it took me 2 years to put a website up, and then when I do put the website up, I don't bother to put up a email or 1-800 number. How are you going to get tips? How are you going to get whistleblowers? So anyway, so finally, and this was after this leaving OUSDINS and under Ronald Moultrie's purview or lack of purview or lack of, I don't know what he's doing. But anyway, the website finally came up, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So it had some interesting bits on there, but of course it didn't have any way to contact them, which if you're going to do that, I would think you should do it. And I think one of the things I thought was interesting was Kathleen Hicks was really like tooting her horn about all of this. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, it was you that set this up under OUSDINS. And oh, by the way, it was Senator Gillibrand's legislation and work that mandated that this get pulled out from under OUSDINS. So I think she was kind of tooting her horn where she really didn't have a place to toot it. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that Kathleen Hicks is now personally overseeing AARO, that she's holding regular meetings with Kirkpatrick, and it seems to be that this really kind of kicks into gear at the end of July. So, you know, we're only just over a month away from that. And then all of a sudden we get the AARO website. It seems like she kind of stepped in there and kind of made some bold moves and said, look, you need to get this up. And here we are. We get this website that, you know, for me personally, it looks like it was put together by a fifth grader. But at the same time, you know, does it have to be big, bold, and beautiful? Not necessarily. It just needs to have certain things within it. And you know, I do see a few positives. I mean, a phone number and an email address would be great. I mean,
the contact us section.
That would be huge. It does give us that kind of coming soon, this reporting mechanism for current or former U.S. government employees, service members, contractors, to talk about what was, mentioned within, I think it was section 1673 of the NDAA for 2023, where they could give, these people from contractors could give direct knowledge of federal programs or activities. And this is where the date 1945 comes back into play, that anything that's happened in these years since 1945, they would be able to report it through the AARO website. So here we are, it's coming soon, So, there's that. I think a lot of people are still taking it a little bit as a joke, but, we'll see how long that takes to kind of come into play.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. One thing that I thought was interesting too was this. I think it was an addition that Chuck Schumer and some others proposed. And is this the UAP? I didn't really prep for this part. The UAP Select Committee was, how I understand it, it was legislation proposed for the NDA by Chuck Schumer and co-sponsors that would put the release of this information under the purview of the White House, sort of in the same way of what they did with declassifying the Kennedy assassination records. What do you know about that?
Yeah, there was talk of that for a while. This Chuck Schumer thing would be talking about, it would form some kind of, I don't know if it would be a committee exactly or a group of people that would work along the same basis of the way that the Kennedy files were released. But I think at the same time, we haven't seen all the Kennedy files released from what I'm hearing. I don't know how good this would be. How is this kind of thing, what's the oversight on this kind of thing? How can we be sure that they are actually giving us the information that they're told to give us? They could give us dribs and drabs and we'd be all like, okay, they've given us something, that must be it. I'm skeptical about that. It depends how much oversight there is on it. Who's gonna know that they've given us what they were told to give us? This is what I think needs to be worked out before we finally get to the end of the year, when the final kind of version of the NDAA and all these kind of really good sounding pieces of legislation.
Oops, we might have lost him there. Oh, yeah, there he goes. Hopefully he'll reconnect here in a second. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. That's lovely Skype for you. Pretty much no one uses Skype anymore, but that's the broadcast interface that we have here. And I think he may be trying to dial back in. Anyway, yeah. So it will be interesting to see what happens in terms of this office. And what's interesting too is this board. Oh, here he is. I was doing a little bit.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of vamping while you were trying to reconnect. One of the things I was noting here was in this proposed 9-member UAP review board, it is saying that what would be included in this would be a historian, an economist, a sociologist, and there's some others in there as well. But I thought that was really interesting too. To me, that seems like it suggests hopefully that they're taking this seriously. But as you say, nothing is sealed in stone until it's in the NDAA.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think one thing that I think we can take a positive away from that, 9 U.S. citizens in a review board nominated by the president, something that sits under the kind of executive branch. I think separating it away from the Pentagon and the DOD, I think that's really good, because then they have serious people that they need to answer to. In theory, that could be really positive. Again, we have to wait and see if something like that comes up. How is it going to work? What are we going to get from it? Is it there so that the end goal is to get transparency and information out to the public? Because I think that's what we need to focus on. That's what we need. Anything else, I think, is just more mishmash and just going around in circles. So it sounds good on paper, but again, we need to see that final result, and we need to see more push for it, more conversations that senators and congresspeople really want this to happen. And I mean, we'll see. I'm just becoming a little bit more and more skeptical until we see some kind of actual movement.
I don't think you're alone in that. My hope is that because this is the most powerful Senate Democrat, is that this will give other Democrats and frankly the Democratic Party is not, with the exception of Gillibrand, this subject seems to really be, it seems to be being owned by Republicans. And one thing that we have said repeatedly is Democrats, we need to step up to the plate. And I think a lot of times politicians are very, very hesitant to comment about this because of the stigma and all that sort of thing. So because it was Chuck Schumer, the most powerful Democrat, the Senate Democrat, it will give people the top cover where they can begin speaking about it, and speaking about it without sort of fear of retribution or political consequences. The other thing I'm hopeful too is that this will finally force the Biden administration's hand. They have been completely, in my view, asleep at the wheel at this whole thing, and it's Biden has a very unique opportunity to break the mold. This has been hidden by presidents of both parties for, what is it, 70-something years. So he has the unique opportunity to finally do the right thing and come clean with the American public. And I think as we've heard many whistleblowers, or people talk about this, whistleblowers and other people that are in national security, there's a way of talking about this with the American public that is not going to endanger national security. Yes, you can't spill the whole beans. There are things that must remain classified, but there's absolutely no reason that we can't be told our place in the universe. Do you think that there are any good reasons not to level with the American public or the world, for that matter, on this reality?
No, I don't. I don't think there's any good reasons. I mean, even if, let's say, for example, and I'm throwing this out there speculatively, if there was something known about this, there was a non-human intelligence that may be some negative aspects to it, that's still not enough reason to withhold it from the general public. I think everybody in this world has a right to know. It doesn't matter if you're a person of power within a certain government of a certain country. Let's not forget that all eyes are on the US and everything, all the momentum and movement that's happening there. But all it would take is for another country, whether it be their government or someone, associated, to break what they know about this phenomena. All eyes will suddenly switch from the US to that country. The US will probably have some kind of panic attack and kind of follow suit. And, we're in a completely different realm, let's say. But again, we were talking about this review board and everything. I think one thing that's important to mention as well is that towards the end of July, there was a few members of the House of Representatives, Matt Gaetz, Burchett, Luna, Moskowitz. They penned a letter to the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, urging the establishment of a UAP select committee. This is yet another avenue that could potentially sort of work within our favor as the general public when it comes to transparency, or certainly the momentum to get transparency into, to us, the general public. So, it seems that there are a lot of different ways that this could come out. We just need to see one of them kind of raise to that next level where it starts to sort of show us that it's happening, other than just all of these kind of what sometimes seem like false promises.
I think for sure false promises, I think it kind of tends to get people's hopes up. And of course, we all end up being disappointed that more has not come out. So let's move on to another article that Chris Sharp from the Liberation Times put out just a couple of days ago, on September 1st. Multiple sources confirmed the Pentagon's UFO office has coordinated collection and analysis of material from unknown origin. I thought that was a pretty significant deal. So basically, he's saying that the AARO office is coordinating collection of spy balloons or things that, as this is stating, analysis of material from unknown origin. What do you think about that? That's pretty nuts.
It's big. It's huge. I'm a big proponent for the work that Chris does. I'm very lucky to be a good friend of his and have a lot of conversations. And one thing I will tell people is that it's not always nice just to hear that we're hearing, Chris is getting this from anonymous sources that he can't divulge. Whether it's Chris or Ross Coulthart, whoever, that's not the greatest thing to hear. But, Chris has multiple sources. He doesn't just work off of one source. He does so much due diligence with the work that he does. And he wouldn't just put this information out there just for the sake of hearing it from one voice, one mouth, one phone call, one email, or anything like that. This is deep diving, speaking to multiple people, really digging deep, and, you know, it's really important information. I don't care what people say. That's the truth of it. You know, he's hearing it from multiple people that aren't always necessarily connected as well.
Exactly. Excuse me. Yeah, he's definitely a friend of the show, and we know his journalistic rigor is quite rigorous. So yeah, reading a couple of things from here. So multiple U.S. intelligence and defense sources have confirmed to Liberation Times that the Pentagon's Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, UAP office, has, as one source stated, quote, coordinated the collection and analysis of materials from an unknown origin. Now, the Susan Go, Pentagon press whatever she is, a press officer, I think, stated, quote, to date, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. So, you know, I think now I believe this may have been an older quote. So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what comes out about that. And yeah, Chris is doing a really great job following all of these leads. And as you mentioned, Ross Coulthart, Mark von Rennenkamp, you know, there's some others really doing some really great journalistic news. Now, one thing we spoke about earlier today was a new website. I don't know if this is a PAC or not, but it's declassifyuap.org. What do you know about these guys? I went through their website. We'll post that up later, but it seems like they're really on the track as far as really generating some activism on this topic.
Yeah, you know, since we had the subcommittee hearing recently, there seems to have been this huge, big push from various people within the community who are just really, you know, taking steps to push it forward, to really emphasize the fact that people within the U.S. really need to contact their representatives to show that they're interested in this subject and they want it to be taken seriously and for more movement to happen. You know, I was very lucky enough to be involved in that as a non-U.S. citizen, to help out a good friend of mine, Ronak Patel, who goes under the name Brodog42, I think it is, on
awesome.
Twitter, who's been doing exceptional work on this subject, who really knows how to kind of put the scripts together for people contacting their representatives. And these are the first steps when people, you know, who are interested in the UFO subject, who want to do something to help. These are the first steps that they can take to kind of be a part of all this, is to just pick up that phone, make that phone call, whether you get the staffers, whatever you get. You know, if this momentum keeps up, you know, there's been some great pushes on this kind of area of activism in the past, and I think that just shows that we need to keep doing this, and I think it's only going to help and benefit. It's certainly not going to do any harm.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We've published some of Ronak's scripts that he's put out, and I think that's a really important point to make, is that everybody has a role to play in this. It's not just somebody that has a YouTube show or a podcast or whatever. It's everybody has a role to play, and it's picking up the phone, talking to your representative's office. They will listen, and the more people that do that, and the more that these elected representatives realize that this is a very important topic that the public, no matter in the UK or here, want to know about, that people just have to get involved. They got to keep up the political pressure. We can't give them a sort of easy out. Keep the pressure on. Let them know that we're taking this seriously, and we want them to take it seriously as well.
Absolutely. We're very lucky as it stands now. When we look back at the subcommittee hearing, you look at the views that some of the YouTube channels had on that hearing, they're way into the millions of views. So we can see that the general public based on previous years' hearings and things like that, that there is a lot more interested in this. And then we look on social media platforms and people are kind of asking, how can I do more? I want to do more. And this is how they can do it. It's no good anymore sort of standing by and typing a few comments saying, we deserve this and we deserve that. It's time to kind of make a little bit more action. Do something. Picking up a phone is not hard. I understand if you have some kind of issue talking on the, like, I'm not saying everyone's comfortable talking on the phone, but if you just want to do something and you are comfortable doing it, pick up the phone, call your representative. Alternatively, you can email them as well. I'm told that it doesn't quite make the same impact. It may get lost in the troves of emails that these very busy senators and representatives get, but everything helps, and I think that's kind of the message that we really need to keep portraying for people.
Very well put. I couldn't agree more, Vinnie. And are you sensing any sort of movement in politics in the UK on this subject, or are they really just kind of waiting to see what the U.S. is going to do politically with this sort of hot potato?
Yeah, you're right. It does seem to be that the UK are kind of almost still taking that back seat to what's happening and not really having any kind of conversation with regards to this subject. Now, one thing I will say, without saying too much, I am currently working very closely with Dr. David Clark on some cases where we're about 4 or 5 levels down of appeals when it comes to freedom of information requests and kind of just saying this is not acceptable. And we're starting to see some fairly positive responses, but until these appeal processes are finalized, I mean, Dr. Clark is not willing to kind of share too much information. We're certainly not holding back anything. It's just a case of, we can't spoil the progress that's being made until he kind of gets that final resolution, let's say. But we're hearing some interesting language, and maybe in the next month or two, we might start seeing something other than your average boilerplate responses when contacting the Ministry of Defence or your kind of local members of Parliament. I've lost sound on you, Matt. I don't know if that's me or everyone else.
There we go. Sorry, I had to cough earlier. Yeah, I think that the U.S. really has got to jump on this and do the right thing, and I think then everyone will sort of follow suit. It doesn't matter where you live. This information needs to be shared.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of information, we just broke right before we came on the air news that we received from sources that multiple whistleblowers have bypassed AARO and gone directly to the ICIG, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and gone through what is called the PPD 19 process. PPD stands for Presidential Policy Directive, and it is essentially the legal mechanism that if you discover something that is being done illegally within the government, in this case within the intelligence community, it is a way for you to formally file a complaint that will launch an investigation and provide protection for you as a whistleblower. But I know for quite a while the professional debunkers were saying, oh, it's just David Grush, and they were making all sorts of really sick claims. I mean, a lot of these folks, they're literally from the bottom of the sewer, claims about David Grush. But now we have news that other whistleblowers involved. Now, we weren't able to get confirmation if these folks were part of the back engineering programs. There was hesitancy to sort of characterize with any specificity, can't say it, it's exactly what they were doing just out of protection. But I thought it was big news in the sense that multiple whistleblowers are going to the Inspector General and ICIG of the United States, and 2, that they completely went around Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. They completely bypassed AARO. They were not comfortable going to AARO and went straight to the ICIG. That's, yeah. What do you think?
It's no surprise. It's no surprise. And let's look at, you yourself have had people like Robert Salas and Mario Woods on your show. And, we know that they've spoken to AARO, and their testimony was taken over the phone. It was small handwritten notes where it didn't seem to be taken seriously. I mean, this is completely taking David Grush out of the equation. Forget about David Grush. AARO didn't seem to be taking these other whistleblowers, maybe whistleblower is the wrong word, but these other witnesses, let's say, they didn't seem to be taking them seriously, dealing with them seriously. The testimony by Mario Woods and Bob Salas should have been taken within a secure setting. They should have been treated with that respect at least. And, you know, then we look at David Grush and the pushback that he's received from multiple directions, let's say. There's no surprise we look at some of the things that Dr. Kirkpatrick has said as well previously, that confidence has to be low in them, you know, so there's no surprise. I'm not surprised that they've gone to the ICIG, you know, Congress, and even Senator Gillibrand said on your show that she was willing to be contacted directly by people as well. You know, so maybe even she's aware that, look, we're aware that AARO aren't going to make people come forward because people don't trust them. I mean, it's not surprising in the slightest.
It's not surprising in the slightest. With the clip that we played earlier of Dr. Kirkpatrick saying there's no evidence of anything. I don't have a clip in front of me, but basically saying, oh yeah, this all sounds like it's all going to be prosaic. And then, as you mentioned, there's one, I wouldn't say whistleblower, but somebody that contacted AARO out of the nuclear community, in the Minuteman nuclear community, and we were fortunate enough to, excuse me, to debrief this individual. I can't say his name, but I can tell you that the experience that this gentleman had was just horrible, and it was characterized as unprofessional. He walked away feeling like they were just essentially there to take the interview because they had no other choice. He even offered information about what chain of command was aware of it, and AARO wasn't interested in that information whatsoever. The fact that they're taking this historical record, these historical record as testimony, and not even bothering to have a sort of court reporter or stenographer, be probably the most who they would have, to go and document all of it, and they're just basically taking notes. And yeah, so I truly think that a lot of these whistleblowers view AARO as a bit of a clown show, and maybe things will change now that it's not under OUSDINS. I certainly hope so. But I do think that the really good news out of this is a lot of folks were thinking, because of the abuse that David Grush took, people saying he didn't know what he was doing because he is on the spectrum and other really sick things, that it would discourage other whistleblowers from coming forward. And I think this is really great news in that we now know that other whistleblowers who obviously have something of significance to share, someone that's just saw a light in the sky isn't going to go and file a complaint with the Inspector General of the United States for intelligence. So we know that this is going to be significant information coming forward. I think all the way around, it's really great news.
I completely agree, and probably shouldn't say it, but and again, I can't put any veracity behind this, but I have been told that there have been witnesses within the program, the people that David Grush was investigating and had spoken to, who have recorded their testimony to people outside of government, so that whatever happens within AARO or Congress or any of this testimony is outside of the government already and could release at any time if things were to go, let's say, south.
Wow, that is the first I've heard of that. So Vinnie, essentially what you're saying is that this testimony or records of what all has occurred is sort of there's sort of a kill switch or for lack of a better way. So if for some reason all of this gets buried, it is going to end up coming out, just not on the terms of the U.S. government.
Absolutely. Listen, I cannot prove it. It's what I've been told. I'm just putting out what I've been told. I'm not putting any veracity behind it. I've had these conversations. That's, I probably shouldn't have said it because I'm probably going to get slaughtered on Twitter, but that's what I've been told, and I'm just purveying that information across. So, that's how I'm going to say it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, all of us, especially that cover this topic, we are told things that are off the record. There are things that these people in the intelligence community or in defense, if they were to go public with what they are talking about, that would cost their jobs. It would cost their livelihood. So they have to be very careful. And that's why you have people speaking to journalists off the record. Our job is to vet these people that are telling us this stuff. So when we go and we make a statement, as we did today, you can assure that that is vetted information. This isn't just something we saw on Twitter or Reddit or something like that. So before we get to what you're going to be up to in Paris, if you don't mind, if you have some time, we have some viewer questions. Would love to get those in. So from Android Paranormal, thank you for the super chat. Burchett scheduled a meeting with McCarthy. Any thoughts? Did you hear about any of what occurred with that?
I didn't, unfortunately. No, I've been trying to keep up with Tim Burchett. He just seems to crop up everywhere. I mean, the latest thing I saw was within the last day, so kind of sidestepping the question, but he's kind of skeptical about the Chuck Schumer amendment. He thinks that there's a lot of dollars involved, and that a lot of this is kind of just looking for more money to fund certain programs and stuff. But when it comes to that, I haven't heard. So. My apologies.
Yeah, no, same thing as well. Sorry, going through our list here. John Lind, do we know if Grush is still cleared at the TSSCI level?
It's a very good question. There's been a lot of conversation about what clearances he still has. So I wouldn't like to say otherwise. Yeah, from what I heard last, he didn't, but I just wouldn't like to say for sure.
I can tell you
because of his position.
Yeah, no,
Go on.
No, he definitely does not.
Right.
So he got read out of everything, and actually, he got read out of the programs. He had to be read back in order to testify. But I suspect he probably does, because he never made any sort of unauthorized disclosure. He didn't do anything he wasn't supposed to, so there's no reason why he would not hold that. He probably just doesn't have the tickets now to speak about various programs as he would have been read out. Gazbo Channel X, I'm probably, oops, hold on one second. I hit the wrong button there. There we go, all right, sorry. First time back in 2 months. Shit's going to happen. Gazbo Channel X, that Gillibrand speech where she seemed to poke fun at the topic, it may well have been a double entendre. She'd have read the room, avoiding alienating, pardon the pun, her audience. What do you think? I was a bit surprised by that one, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of one of those moments I think a lot of people in the community were very disheartened, but, I'd like to think that maybe it was just a case of who she was in front of, how she kind of, had to kind of move it to that kind of side of the conversation where she probably smiled a little bit, talked about drones probably a little bit more than we may have liked her to. Hopefully it was just that a one-day reading the room kind of situation, and that it didn't mean that she'd lost complete interest, because it's very easy to think that we hear something negative and it's all over. Oh my goodness,
Right.
So let's hope that was the case.
David Smethurst, another friend of the show, do you think the new legislation enables an alternative, politically controlled architecture of disclosure? Well, that's an interesting question. Do you think the new legislation enables an alternative, politically controlled architecture of disclosure? I don't know about that.
I mean, look, this is where it comes into play. We've had numerous different pieces of legislation put forward this year when it comes to what's going to be proposed for the final NDAA, and even the IAA as well, the Intelligence Authorization Act. But this is what I was saying earlier. I think now when we get the Senate and the House back, and then we have people from primarily, as Douglas Dean Johnson has put out, primarily from the Armed Services Committee of the Senate and the Senate Intelligence Committees, that not just them, but primarily them, There will be a few other people involved, but this is where they're really going to start hashing out the final legislation and pull all of these different components together to really kind of give us an idea where we're going to look next year. Because let's look back for the last 2 or 3 years. It seems to we've kind of stepped it up each year. So we're going to hope that by 2024 and the implementation of the National Defense Authorization Act for that year, we're going to see even more stricter and tighter rules and regulations when it comes to, oversight and things like that, whether it be within government or within contractors. Let's just wait and see. I think it's too early to say. There have been certain pieces of legislation that point in the right direction, but certain things in there, I just don't see how they're going to kind of police it. How are they going to say that Chuck Schumer's thing, how are they going to declassify all these documents? How are they going to know that they've declassified everything and they've not just hidden a really important trove of it somewhere else and shifted it? There's so many questions that come with that. So I like to think that we'll move in the right direction, but I don't know how much it's going to be implemented and policed.
Agreed. This is from Emron95. In the AARO website, part of the mission is recovery and exploitation. What are your thoughts on that? I was kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting use of words, isn't it? And it's very easy to read into that and say that it points to kind of some kind of retrieval program or something like that. I don't know. I think if you look back at the NDAA, that was always part of kind of the language that was put into that. So I'm not going to make too much judgment on the semantics, let's say, right now. I've looked at kind of some of the conversations happening on Twitter around those very small, short phrases, and it gets very conspiratorial very quickly. So I've kind of taken a step back, and I'm going to wait and see on that without kind of adding fuel to the fire, let's say.
Understood. Another question here from David. Do you both think that Grush's testimony has narrowed the focus on the topic in that we can now be certain in some things and focus on what he didn't say? David's got really, really intelligent questions. That's a good one.
Is that Dave Smethurst?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, very good questions, Dave. I mean, look, Grush has kind of given what he can. He's pointed people in the right directions behind the scenes. I mean, what more can we ask for right now? I don't know. I can see the positive side of things that, let's say he gave this information to certain people and now they're investigating behind the scenes, whether it be within the ICIG, whether it's people within Congress who have the power to go and look at these programs. I don't know. One thing we have seen is that, we've had talk about funding being cut from some of these contractual programs if certain things aren't said. But again, it comes down to how these things are implemented. I think that's kind of a future thing that we need to look at. Do we see any momentum? Do we see people hiding these things? I just, with all my kind of positivity that I have within this subject, I have to kind of take on board that I'm not so sure kind of aspect as well. So potentially we could be looking at a very, very good, but we seem to be kind of getting towards the point of a pyramid. But are we going to get there this year, next year, or in 5 or 10 years?
Right.
How much more does the legislation need to hone in on exactly what needs to be done? I don't know.
Okay, last question here from Harvinder Sunila. Vinnie, do you think NHI want disclosure? Are they the ones who want, or are they the ones that want secrecy? I mean, anybody's guess there, right?
I mean, yeah, asking me, one, we don't listen. Let's be honest here. We don't know conclusively if it's NHI. As much as all our biases and wants and wishes would love it to be in some degree, we don't know that. I mean, look, if NHI wanted it to be common knowledge, then they would just land on the White House lawn. That same old sentiment that we hear all the time. If they really, really wanted it, they could make it happen yesterday.
Right.
Today, So
that's true.
I mean, we can speculate all day about why they won't. What have they got to hide? Maybe they're playing a waiting game for something. We could talk about that for literally a month-long live stream.
that is true. Now, speaking of live stream and your show on Disclosure Team, I understand you have a really great guest coming up.
Yeah, which one?
Ralph Blumenthal, I just saw that.
I do indeed, yeah. I mean, it's always, Ralph has been a guest before, and it's always interesting to talk to him about his stories. But, this is the first time I've got to have a really in-depth conversation with Ralph about the build-up to him and Leslie Kean releasing the Grush story and all the ins and outs. Now that the kind of dust has settled, I feel like it's a perfect time to kind of go back and kind of get that real detailed before, during, and after the story broke, and then to also see, if Ralph's been involved in any conversations since. I think it's an exciting time. Ralph is always an absolutely special guest.
I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a really interesting story to find out what really happened behind the scenes, because we all know there were quite a few things going on at the time. And then I also understand you're going to be the host of the European Congress for UAP Studies and Research, and that's in Paris at Sorbonne. Mispronouncing that university. What can you tell us about that? That sounds great.
Yeah, so it's an absolute honor to be kind of the MC/host of this prestigious event. This is a kind of, I guess it's a conference in Paris at the Sorbonne University, which is kind of Paris's equivalent of Harvard and Oxford, Cambridge here in the UK, where it's going to be really focused on the kind of very much academic and scientific aspect of the UAP studies. So, we're lucky to have guests such as Christopher Mellon in France, and Jacques Vallée as well. Avi Loeb is going to be tuning in virtually. But then we've got a whole host of European and French UFO researchers and pilots and things like that. So, yeah, I'm very lucky to be there, kind of introducing all the guests and moderating some very interesting panel discussions in a very scientific and academic way in such a prestigious location.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations on that, and I can't wait to hear, see what comes out of that. You truly have some of the foremost minds on this topic that are going to be there speaking on this topic. Well, anyway, Vinnie, thank you so much for joining us. Season 2, and glad to have you back at the top of the season. You're a good friend of the show, and we're huge fans of your work. And yeah, man, we look forward to seeing your Ralph Blumenthal interview. And you said there was one other or some others that when I said, oh, I hear you have a really great one coming up. What else do you have coming up on Disclosure Team?
Yeah, so this Wednesday, in a couple of days' time, I will be live with Ralph. But then next week, I am going to be interviewing UFO Joe Mergier, to get his take on everything. So, that's always something to look forward to. But then I'm off to the US for a week. So, there's always things in the works, though, with the Disclosure Team. So just, everyone that's interested, please come and follow me across my social media, keep up with the latest information and news. And I appreciate all the support. And Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, my friend, to be here with you today. So thank you.
My pleasure's all mine. We really appreciate it. Folks, that's it for our Season 2 episode of The Good Trouble Show. Again, if you enjoy our work, we appreciate a follow. And most importantly, tell your friends about us. The only way we grow is through word of mouth. So we will see you soon.